Okay, here we are again. Take two. Hey there YouTube, I'm Danny with Danny's Tech Channel. If you're new here, I perform hardware reviews, how-to videos, and build full PCs. Today I'm revisiting something that I tried a few months ago. I upgraded my personal rig to an i7-10700K and a Z490 series motherboard. If you want to know more about that, I'll leave a link down in the description below so you can see how it all turned out. Let's get into it. Okay, so a real quick background of what happened. I got the 10700K and the Z490 series motherboard right when they released, like pretty much the first week it came out. I threw it all in my system, did all the upgrades. Like I said, you can check out the video for that. But after about 3 days of using the computer, I noticed a really high-pitched buzzing noise coming from the top of the case. It wasn't like a pump whine from my liquid cooler. It wasn't from the graphics card, because I've had this graphics card and I tried multiple graphics cards because that's easy to swap in and out. So I pulled everything out of the case, and it turns out the VRM is whining from the capacitors, I guess. I tried multiple power supplies, and it will intensify and de-intensify with different levels of power supplies. The higher quality power supply, the quieter it gets. But anyways, so I tried multiple motherboards. I tried the original board that I got, the MSI Z490 Ace. I got 2 of those and tried them and RMA'd them. I tried the Asus Z490 Maximus. That one had the same noise, which was a shame because it is a beautiful board with tons of features. And then finally now I decided to revisit this because I still had the processor. I could not return that. So I got the Z490 Tomahawk. I got the Tomahawk because they're kind of like budget boards with higher end parts. The B450 Tomahawk from MSI was like the go-to board, B450 board. So I figured, why not? Let's try this Z490. It was under $200, so I'm not investing a ton of money into it just for a testing rig. I wanted something that was gonna be moderately priced and not crazy high end, that I can still test everything with, and if I don't want it to create a bottleneck or anything like that. So let's talk about the parts. First part I'll get into is the i7-10700K. It's 8 cores, 16 threads, and turbos up to 5.1 gigahertz. The reason I chose the i7 is it really won't date too quickly because it just came out in the past 2 months. This is still one of the highest performing chips for gaming. And it should work great for testing with all these upcoming graphics cards like the new RTX cards or AMD's Big Navi. The second part I'm ending up going with is, like I said, the MSI Z490 Tomahawk. It's a LGA 1200 socket. It can fit any of these newest chips, the i9-10900K, the i5 10600K. It has a 2.5 gig network solution. It has USB 3.2 Gen 2x2, which is a 20 gigabit per second transfer speed, and it has a built-in I/O shield. You can see the VRMs are quite beefy. The cooling on them is rather large, very thick, so they definitely upgraded the components to be able to handle the newer type of stuff. The next thing I'm gonna use in this setup is 16 gigabytes of G.Skill's Trident Z RAM. It's at 3200 megahertz. This is more than adequate for what I wanna do with this setup. 16 gigs is kind of the standard, as well as 3200 megahertz. I feel like that's the sweet spot now for gaming, productivity, whatever you wanna do. As soon as you get into the higher levels of speed, like 3600 megahertz and 4000 megahertz, that's when RAM really starts to get expensive. Next is EVGA's 600BQ power supply. This is a 80 plus bronze power supply. It's semi-modular, so if I don't need the extra cables like the SATA cables or maybe a bigger VGA cable or something like that, I can always just take those things off as needed. 600 watts is more than enough for anything that I'm gonna be testing. I plugged this in with a 2080 Ti and a 9900K, and the thing works fine. I didn't overclock anything, but I have a feeling it would do just fine even with overclocks. Finally, the last thing is Crucial's P1 NVMe SSD. This is a 500 gig SSD. I'm really an advocate of these Crucial hard drives lately. You can find these hard drives for the same price that a lot of the standard SATA drives are going for. I don't know how Crucial is keeping their prices so low, but they are the best price for an NVMe drive right now that I can find. I think I paid $60 for this on Newegg. I'll leave a link for it if you want to check them out. Okay, so let's take a look at these noises from the power supplies. I did 2 different types of noise tests. I performed one with an older power supply that I had. It's the Corsair RM650. It's the yellow label. They have a white label and a yellow label. The yellow label is the older model. I got it back in like 2016, 2015, somewhere around there. It's been great so far. I mean, I've used it for all these years, but like I said, as soon as I plugged the system in, the new motherboard and everything with that power supply, I got this. And so for the second test, I used the Evga 600BQ. It's brand new. I just got it like a week ago, so I don't know if they started using better capacitors or whatever, or Evga uses better capacitors than Corsair. I'm really not sure, but take a look at the sound for this one. As you can see, the noise intensifies with the older power supply, and then on top of that, like I said, the cheaper capacitors that Corsair used in that generation of power supply may have something to do with the way the noise sounds. If you have any ideas of what this might be, let me know down in the comments. I could always use some tips or tricks to test different things to see what this might be, but I've already tried different power supplies, different RAM, different motherboards, different graphics cards, no graphics cards, the noise is still there. So short of getting a whole new 10th gen chip, I've tried everything else that I could think of. I even tried different CPU coolers. But basically for all this, I wanted to get a setup that I could use as a constant for any kind of upcoming testing. Like I said, there's a lot of graphics cards coming out, different CPUs for AMD side coming out, and I needed to be able to test things. I'd like to pick up the i5 10600K because everything that I've been hearing is like that is the chip for gaming because it's decent price, 6 cores, 12 threads, and it really competes well. If you overclock it, it's at the same performance level as a 10900K. So that's pretty incredible. Again, these are some of the parts that I plan on using for my new test setup. I may swap the power supply for something a little beefier later or a different kit of RAM or something like that. But for the most part, I wanted to keep the board and the CPU together because that's the main thing that will produce all the heat and everything like that to be constant in the case. What do you think of the setup? Are these good parts to use for a case testing rig and graphics card testing later on, or do you think I should change something out? Don't forget to subscribe down below and turn on that bell notification so you'll know when the case reviews start going live within the next coming weeks. I'm Danny, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.